Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is a reading roundup. In my reading roundup videos, I just talk about the books that I've been reading recently, but I also wanted to include a little bit of a life update in this video. So many of you have been so kind in your comments, asking me how I'm doing and telling me that you're thinking of me and praying for me, and I really appreciate all those comments. So I thought I would let you know quickly what's going on. I have had my final chemo treatment, so yay! That was such a long road. In the end, I had 16 chemo treatments and it took about 5 months. So it was a long time, and so I am really thankful to be at the end of that, and I am now waiting for surgery. So that's where things stand right now. And so again, I just really appreciate your comments and that you guys are thinking of me and praying for me, and I'm so grateful. So let us get on with the books. Some of these are going to be from series September, and some are just books that I'm reading. So let's just dive straight in. I read Survive the Night by Riley Sager. I've read a couple of his books. I've read the Final Girls book that he wrote and Lock Every Door. This one intrigued me because it was set in the early 90s, and yeah, I love that. So it's set in 1991 and I was in grade 12 in 1991, and yeah, so there's just so much about this book that I remember. So there was a lot of nostalgia involved in this story. Anyway, our main character is Charlie, and Charlie is at university, and it's November, but it's still about 10 days before Thanksgiving, and Charlie has decided that she needs to go home. Her roommate was murdered, and there's some killer they call the campus killer, and her roommate was murdered, and she had thought that she could stay at school until Thanksgiving, but she just realized that she needs to go home. And so she's looking for a ride home, and she meets a guy called Josh who is also heading her way, and so she decides to travel with him. She's going to, I don't remember, to Ohio, I think. And so she basically gets in a car with a stranger after, her roommate has been murdered, which, doesn't sound like a great idea. And as she is traveling with this man, she starts to think that maybe she is traveling with the killer. So yeah, this one was fun. I liked the fact that it was all set during that one drive, like during that one night. I like that when there's that constricted time in a story. It certainly adds to the tension. I loved all the 90s references, the clothes that they were wearing, the music they were listening to, the movies, all of it. That part was really entertaining. And then for series September, I read The Kill Fee by Fiona Veitch-Smith. This was to read the second book in a series. I'm just looking at my bingo card here just to remind myself. Yeah, the second book in a series. And this is the Poppy Denby Investigates series. This is historical mystery set in England in the 1920s. And Poppy is a reporter. She is the arts and entertainment editor at the Daily Globe, and she gets called to cover an exhibition of Russian art at the Crystal Palace. And while she is there, the lights go off, there's a gunshot, and a Fabergé egg is stolen. And so, of course, she gets herself involved. Now, I really enjoyed the aspect of the Russian emigres and the Russian Revolution, what was happening in Russia, what had happened in Russia before. So the Russian Revolution had happened, and you get all of these, they were called White Russians, so like the aristocracy, the rich Russian people were escaping, and a lot of them had gone to England. So I did really enjoy that aspect of the story. I thought that was great. There were lots of suspects, and so she's investigating, trying to get her story of who stole the egg, and you know, why there was gunshots and all of that. So yeah, it was just really fun. And I did a buddy read of The Rose Garden by Susanna Kearsley. I read this with Carolyn from Carolyn's Reading Ramblings and Taylor from The Babbling Bee. And I loved this book. I loved it. It was so good, and it was so fun to be able to talk about this book with those two girls. And so The Rose Garden is the story of Eva. She goes back to Cornwall after her sister dies. She leaves California and returns to Cornwall for a visit. And they spent their childhood summers there. She wants to spread the ashes, her sister's ashes, there. And so she's staying at the house where she stayed when she was a child. And so she's renewing friendships with people. And one day she's walking in the grounds at this house, and she kind of finds herself in the past. She has time traveled to the 1700s. I'm not entirely sure. But she is in the past, and she meets the people who live in that house in the past. And so it was just so great. What I loved about this time travel is Susanna Kearsley writes it the way that I like. She doesn't bother to explain how it works, because that never works out if an author tries to explain too much. So she doesn't bother trying to explain how it works. Eva has no control over it at all, of when she travels back in time or when she travels back to her own time. And so I loved that aspect of it, that she just never knows when it's going to happen. But when she travels back in time, if she's wearing her modern day clothes, and that's a big problem. And so she has to, like, kind of, you know, quickly change clothes and all of that. But she ends up, of course, leaving clothes behind on either end. And so I was giggling at some point during this book, because I was like, at some point she's going to run out of clothes, because everybody has a limited wardrobe, right? So yeah, so I loved that she had no control over when it was going to happen, and that she's just dropped into situations when she gets back in time, that she just doesn't, you know, she doesn't know what's going to happen. I also enjoyed that when she goes back to the present, it's like she was never gone. But when she leaves, like, the past, time passes, if you understand what I mean. Anyway, I loved this book so much. I really enjoyed this story. I just thought it was fantastic. And then I read Midsummer Mysteries by Agatha Christie. This was also a buddy read with Carolyn from Carolyn's Reading Ramblings. She very, very kindly bought this book for me, and it's a collection of short stories, and we wanted to read it before fall, basically, while it was still summer. And this was fun. All of these short stories were rereads for me, but I just really love this collection. I think the book itself is gorgeous, and I really enjoyed the stories. So we had stories with Miss Marple, Poirot, Parker Pyne, as well as some standalone stories. So we have The Blood-Stained Pavement, The Double Clue, Death on the Nile, Harlequin's Lane, The Adventure of the Italian Nobleman, Jane in Search of a Job, The Disappearance of Mr. Davenham, The Idle House of Astarte, The Rajah's Emerald, The Oracle at Delphi, The Adventure of the Sinister Stranger, and The Incredible Theft. So yeah, this one was a really fun buddy read. And then I read Death of a Traveling Man by M.C. Beaton. This is from my personal reading challenge. I read that when I'm at chemo, and I haven't finished these series. So for this reading challenge, I had 3 series that I was going to read, and for the Hamish Macbeth series, it was just the books that I own from that series that I wanted to read. And so I'm just going to keep going. So I have a few weeks to recuperate before surgery, and then I'm going to need to recuperate after surgery. So I'm just going to keep the reading challenge going during this time and continue with these series because I've been enjoying them so much. So Death of a Traveling Man tells the story of Hamish Macbeth. He is the village constable in Lochdu in Scotland, and a couple arrives in the village in a van. They're travelers, and Hamish meets them and is not really impressed by their character, let's say, and personalities, and he figures that there is going to be trouble. And he is not wrong. The man, I forget what his name is already, Sean is found beaten to death, and his girlfriend has taken off. So there's an assumption that the girlfriend did it. But of course, Hamish needs to investigate because there are suspects within the village because there was trouble. So yeah, this was a fun one in the series. I do love MC Beaton, and the Hamish Macbeth series is always fun to head back to Lochdu. And then for series September, I read The Tooth Tattoo by Peter Lovesey. This was for the prompt of reading 2 books in the same series. So this is the Peter Diamond series. This is a police procedural set in Bath in England. And I enjoy this series a lot, actually. I like Peter Diamond as a main character. He's an interesting character. He's kind of one of those police officers who is just, he loves his job, he does his job, he's very good at his job, but he can be grumpy, he can be a little bit difficult to work with, he's not so great with the technology, but it's great. And what I love about this series as well is that there's always some aspect to the story, to the mystery, and in this one it's music. And so we have Mel Ferrin, who plays the viola, and he gets approached in a very, very mysterious manner to join a quartet. And he ends up finding out it's a pretty famous quartet, and their past violist, went missing a couple years before, and the assumption is that he's dead, and they've realized that they need to find a new viola player, and so they end up hiring him, and he joins this string quartet, and they get a residency at Bath Spa University, and so they all move to Bath, and then a body is discovered in the city canal, and Peter Diamond and his team are investigating, and of course there's a connection to Mel and this string quartet. So it was really good. There was a lot in here about classical music, about string quartets. It was really, really interesting. So yeah, I quite enjoy this series. And so there's going to be another one coming up because that prompt was to read 2 books in one series. I also read Sweet Sorrow for series September by David Roberts. This is the last book in the Lord Edward Corinth and Verity Brown series, so that fulfilled the prompt of finishing a series. This is from 2009, and this is a series that I've been reading for a while, but it kind of just dropped off my radar, and I realized I wanted to get it finished. It's a series that's set in England in the 30s, and so that part is kind of what really attracted me to this series. I enjoyed the time period and the stuff about like kind of the lead up to the war sometimes even more than the mysteries, and definitely more than the characters sometimes. Verity Brown is a character that just drives me crazy. But this last book in the series is set in August in 1939. And Edward and Verity are in a village now. They live in a village in Sussex, and they're in the village. Virginia Woolf lives in the village with her husband Leonard and a number of other people, including a local poet called Byron Gates. And he is found after the village fete with his head chopped off. And there had been an event at the village fete where the children did these tableaus, and there was a couple of them included executions. So there was a block and a sword and all that stuff. And so anyway, he's found on the village screen with his head chopped off. And so of course Edward ends up investigating. So this was, it was an interesting end to the series, I have to say. The very end was interesting, but it's a series that I have now completed, and I am glad about that. I read The Franchise Affair by Josephine Tay. This was also a buddy read. I read this with Becca from Hicks Picks Books, and it was really fun reading this with her and talking about our experiences reading this book. I have read a few Josephine Tays now, and she's funny. She's a great writer, great mysteries, but none of her mysteries so far have been traditional mysteries. This is from 1948, and the main character is Robert Blair. He is a solicitor in his little town, and he gets contacted by Marion Sharp and her mother, Mrs. Sharp, because the police have arrived at their house to say that a 15-year-old girl claims that they kidnapped her, kept her in their attic for a month, and beat her. And Marion Sharp realizes that she needs some help. She needs solicitor's advice, and so she wants Robert Blair to come and help them. And so it's a case of like finding out what really happened, because this girl knows a lot of detail about their house that she wouldn't know if she hadn't been in it, basically is what it seems like. And so it was a really interesting story. There did end up being a bit of a courtroom drama to it. There was a court case, and it was really good. This is one of the Inspector Grant in the series. It's an Inspector Grant book, but he's in here very, very little. So I find that interesting, because this is listed as the third of the Inspector Grant books, but he is hardly in here at all. And so I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was funny at times. It had great characters and a good mystery of like what really happened. Yeah, I did really enjoy this one too. And then the second Peter Lovesey that I read was The Stone Wife. And this is the next up in the Peter Diamond series. And this one was quite good too. So like I said in this series, this always, each book in the series has kind of something different. And this one opens with an auction, and they are auctioning off a stone statue called the Wife of Bath. And it was given a valuation of about £3,000, and the auction, during the auction, it just takes off, and it has gone up to £24,000, and there's two people that are still bidding on it, when suddenly three people appear in balaclavas with guns saying to stop the auction. They're taking the Wife of Bath. And so it's a huge shock for everybody, because they've been so invested in this auction, and it's been so quiet. The only voice that's been heard is the auctioneer's voice, and then suddenly this other voice rings out, "Nobody move." And one of the men who has been bidding, kind of in a not such a great idea, kind of goes toward one of these men, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And he ends up getting shot. So Peter Diamond and his team have to investigate this robbery and why this man was shot. It was really, really interesting. So the assumption made was that this wife of Bath was a statue of the wife. It's the wife of Bath from Chaucer, and so then they were looking into that. So they spent there's a lot in the book about Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales and time that if he spent any time in Bath or that area. Yeah, and again, just really interesting. I really like that the kind of these directions that the books take. And so one of the team ends up having to go undercover, which was really interesting. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one in the series. So there you have it. Here is my final series September bingo card. I did pretty good. There was two squares that I didn't manage to fulfill, but I did read other books from series that I've been reading during the month as well that weren't part of this bingo board. So I feel like I did, I feel like series September was a definite success. I definitely made progress in series that I've been reading. So, have you read any of these books that I have mentioned? I would love to chat with you about them in the comment section down below, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye.